Hello and welcome to the Trusted Podcast. I'm Blake Johnson, the host, and I am grateful to have Becky Harris on the show today. Becky, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so Becky is a good friend of mine, and she is got a very unique career and a very unique thing that we're going to talk about today, and that is the gaming industry. So Becky, why don't you start by giving us a little bit of background of how you got into this and what makes you kind of the expert at this.
All right, well, I'm going to start with what I'm doing now and work a little bit backward. So I am the Distinguished Fellow in Gaming and Leadership at UNLV's International Gaming Institute. Most of the work that I do is with gaming regulators, academics, and a variety of stakeholders throughout the world. And I get to work on a host of gaming and leadership-related issues and projects, mostly incredibly interesting. As part of what I do for UNLV, I get to focus on women and leadership in gaming in the gaming industry. Currently, I'm working on academic research involving how the global pandemic has impacted leadership in the gaming industry and whether or not there are disproportionate impacts based on gender. So prior to my current role, I served as the first female chair of the Nevada Gaming Control Board. As that chief regulator, I helped guide the board through a number of controversial matters, including sexual harassment issues, challenges involving legalization of recreational cannabis and its relationship to gaming regulation, the repeal of PASPA, which is the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, and the emergence of sports betting across the United States, as well as the various Wire Act issues that attend to that. When we go back to 2014, until I was appointed chair of the Nevada Gaming Control Board, I represented Senate District 9 in the Southwest in the Nevada legislature. I served for 2 legislative sessions and 2 special sessions and had the privilege of chairing the Senate Education Committee and being a member of Senate Judiciary, Finance, Education, and Commerce and Labor and Energy committees. Kind of a mouthful, but that is what I've been doing for the last several years. And all of those experiences have given me perspective and opportunities in the gaming industry. And so I have had an opportunity to rub shoulders with all kinds of stakeholders and regulators and people in the gaming industry across the world.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you got on the show. I feel honored because I know there's a lot more important people who give you a call because of the positions you've held. So thank you again for being on the show.
It's my pleasure.
All right, so let's talk COVID-19 since I know you've been doing a lot of research with that. So how have the COVID-19 shutdowns here in Nevada affected gaming, and then then we can kind of go into the overall economy, how that affects it.
Okay, so right off the bat, I want to distinguish between gambling, which is what we call gaming, and the gaming industry calls it gaming, and gaming, which is video games, which is esports and another facet of the gambling world. But I just want to make sure for listeners who may not know much about the gaming industry that when we're talking about gaming, we're talking about the gambling industry, and for right now, particular to the state of Nevada. It's kind of interesting. I had an opportunity to moderate a panel of female executives in the gaming industry here in Nevada as one of the things that I do in my current role. It was really an interesting opportunity. I got to speak with Ellen Whittemore, General Counsel of the Wynn Resorts, Virginia Valentine, who's president of Nevada Resorts Association, Jan Jones-Blackhurst, who is on the board of Caesars, and Sandra Douglas Morgan, who's the current chair of the Nevada Gaming Control Board. And I am told that that is the first time we've had an all-female panel with a female moderator talking about issues endemic to the gaming industry. And our topic of conversation was from shutdown to reopening, what do things look like in the gambling industry? So I'm going to give that as some context and then just share 2020 was really interesting. If you can remember back to January as the new year was ushered in, the general economic outlook was cautiously optimistic. And the Wall Street Journal reported that economists were broadly upbeat for 2020, and the National Retail Federation expected steady growth going forward. And it almost feels like they were tempting fate when they predicted economies do not run out of steam and a big event is needed to knock down a $20 trillion economy, right? So little did we know that the world was headed for a pandemic. So
it's like the announcer's first, right?
Right.
Whenever you say it happens.
That's right. So as talk of declaring a global pandemic began to grow and governments throughout the world began to issue shutdown and shelter-in-place orders, public health concerns brought about by the COVID-19 global pandemic led to the closure of all U.S. brick-and-mortar casinos, something that has never happened in the history of our country. In fact, in an unprecedented move, the governor of Nevada ordered all gaming devices, machines, tables, games, and any equipment related to gaming activity had to cease operations effective March 17, 2020 at midnight. So he effectively shut down gaming in the state of Nevada, and he did that in an attempt to stop the spread of COVID-19. It's interesting to note, though, that not since John F. Kennedy's funeral had any Nevada casinos ever closed their doors. And even in that case, it was just the casinos in Las Vegas. So though we had U.S. casino closings and reopening dates that vary across state lines, every casino in the U.S. was shut down as of March 25th, 2020. And that resulted in a lot of shortfalls for state budgets across the United States that rely on the tax revenues that come from legal regulated gambling. And for those states that have brand new sports betting operations, the nascent sports betting industry as well. So casinos began to reopen slowly and surely around the 1st of May, and then Nevada casinos resumed their operations on June 4th in 2020. So we were pretty shut down for a long time.
So how does that local, the local Nevada casinos affect Nevada as a state? As far as you mentioned the budgeting concerns, what does that look like from a long-term perspective?
So it's kind of interesting. I think the answer to that is we don't know yet. Just yesterday, news was out that all across Europe, they're considering shuttering their casinos again for a second time. So as we move into our fall and we're watching what happens with COVID-19 and whether or not our healthcare systems are going to be overwhelmed and what kind of public health concerns and considerations need to take place, I think we just don't really know long term what it means. I mean, we've learned a few things. States that are dependent on gambling revenues are really in trouble as far as their state budgets go, and Nevada certainly falls into that camp. But there are lots of budget shortfalls across the United States. Not so familiar with budgets in other countries, but it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Just in the US, gaming is. So worldwide, that's significant. And to not have those revenues come into the state or government budgets to help pay for really important things like healthcare and mental health and schooling and all those other public amenities that we like to provide for, that is the proper role of government to pay for, it becomes very, very challenging.
Can you speak at all? I mean, I know this is very out there as far as predictions, but when do you think people are going to feel comfortable with kind of resuming things to normal, or is there even going to be a resuming of what things were before? Are we going to see permanent changes made?
So I'm going to start with Nevada. We'll keep my remarks close to Nevada. I think that people are comfortable. They're already beginning to return to the casinos. We have governor orders that casinos are only to operate at 50% capacity. I hear anecdotally that there are some properties on the Strip that are at about 30 to 35% of their capacity. We've seen pictures of other properties where the place seems teeming with people, and like they're doing pretty well. But I can talk more specifically to some of the numbers that were just recently reported. So the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority reported that we had 1.537 million people visiting Southern Nevada in August. And that, for perspective, is 57% less than the August in 2019. They also reported that our one of the weekend occupancies in August was at about 63.1%, which isn't bad. But when you contrast that to a year ago, our weekend occupancies were at 95.2%. And that was one of the highest ever recorded occupancy rates. But, it's pretty significant when you're looking year over year. When you move to downtown, and not so that's off the strip into the Fremont Experience and downtown area, hotel occupancy in August was about 40%, which is half of what it was a year ago, and gaming revenue is off about 22%. So we're going to feel the impacts for a while, and I think part of the challenge is that we've had no convention traffic for 5 straight months. Like, we've taken zero revenues in on convention traffic. As of October 1st, conventions were able to resume at 50% capacity. Late yesterday or early this morning, the governor just announced that he's hoping to be able to lift that restriction in January, but that's going to all be dependent on what happens with COVID. And where our numbers are and how our healthcare system works and whether or not we're, strained and all of those kinds of things. So I think that there is a very careful calculus that goes into determining public health and safety, public awareness, and just making sure that we are acting in appropriate ways as the pandemic continues to rage on, as we're trying to find out really what those solutions are and what they look like. Some of the new things, though, that you'll see in casinos are hand sanitizer stations throughout. People are wearing masks, temperature scans. You see very vigorous cleaning. The thought prior to COVID was that all of the cleaning of the machines and the tables and the areas needed to kind of be kept out of sight and done at night in the background. And now it's full front and center, so that people can take confidence in the fact that there are cleaning mechanisms and measures in place so that they don't have to worry about the communicability of COVID-19. There have also been plexiglass that's been installed. Some casinos, you'll see every other slot machine is available for play to enforce and maintain that social distancing. So, and those are just the visible things that you can see. Earlier this year, Matt Maddox, of the Win, put out a reopening strategy. It was published in the newspapers, and the level of detail in that plan, everything from housekeeping to food preparation to restaurants to staff to concierge to table operations, cage operations, it was meticulous and gave me a lot of comfort knowing that there was such incredible thought going into his blueprint for how we should be reopening casinos in Nevada.
Do you think those cleaning standards are something that's going to stick around because people are used to them now, wanting things to be so clean and have that visibility? Or do you think we can see it return to being kind of back behind the scenes?
So I think that those cleaning measures will be in place for the next several years at least. I think that there is a psychological comfort in knowing that the materials and the machines and the interactions in public are clean and safe. I feel a great amount of comfort going to the grocery store and having the attendant there wiping down the grocery cart so that I know that it's safer and attempts have been made so that as I'm, going about my daily business, I'm, at a reduced risk for contracting COVID and other things. And I think that's the same in any industry, but in the gaming industry in particular, where it's such a social activity, so much interaction of people coming together and enjoying the entertainment and just, congregating and sharing their experiences. That's really what I think sets apart brick and mortar casinos, is the social component.
So let's talk about what people did during the shutdown. So I imagine we saw a shift to online gaming, which I think we've already seen prior to COVID. So, can you speak at all to the shift to online gaming and where that stands in relation to the brick and mortar gaming institutions?
Happy to do that. Again, we're going to get our vocabulary straight. We've got to distinguish between online sports betting and then what is commonly now becoming known as iGaming here in Nevada. It's internet gaming. It's got a different term entirely. So in Nevada, not much is going to change, or it doesn't appear that much is going to change, though the Gaming Control Board is currently opening up section or Regulation 22, which is the sports betting regulation. And maybe there will be some changes to the regulations with regard to wagering accounts and whether or not you can do a remote sign up, which isn't like an online sign up, versus right now you have to go in person to a sports book to sign up for a wagering account. So Nevada's kind of its unique jurisdiction, and it deals with these issues in a different way than other jurisdictions do. In terms of just iGaming, which is internet casino, not very many states offer that. Currently, iGaming is only available in New Jersey, Delaware, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and then in a limited capacity here in Nevada, and I'll talk about that in just a second. And then Michigan has legalized online gaming, but it has not yet rolled it out. So in New Jersey, just like in a brick and mortar, an online casino exists where you can play slot machines, table games, a whole variety of offerings are made available. And while I was chair of the Gaming Control Board in 2018, the multi-state compact between Nevada, New Jersey, and Delaware was ratified, and then the online gaming offerings were made available to the public. One of the benefits of an interstate compact is that they can be tailored to meet the needs of a particular jurisdiction. So, for example, as part of that agreement, New Jersey and Delaware participate in both online casinos and poker, but Nevada only participates in poker. We're in that interstate interstate compact solely for the liquidity in poker, and so you can play poker in Nevada and play against people in New Jersey and Delaware. So that's one version of online sports betting or online gaming. The other version is online sports betting, which is really interesting. That started to roll out in late 2018 and continues. So currently we've got 18 states plus DC that offer legal single game sports wagering, or as it's known in the industry, Nevada style sports betting. We have 4 other states that have legalized it. It's authorized, but it's not operating yet. Those states are rolling out their regulations, getting their regulatory structures in place, vetting their licensees, and looking through gaming applications to determine who is going to be allowed to conduct business in their state borders. And then we've got 6 states that are actively pursuing some kind of sports betting legislation or ballot initiative. And so November will be really interesting to find out how voters in those states are going to look at the legalization of sports betting. There's a lot of talk nationwide about how legalized sports betting, and even iGaming, online casino, can be yet another source of revenue for states during this unpredictable time of COVID, where people can be required to shelter in place just on a very quick timetable, and businesses are shut down for weeks. New Jersey has invested heavily in its online casino offerings, online gaming offerings, and they actually thrived in terms of their gaming operations during the COVID-19 outbreak. They were able to continue to offer gaming online, and they were generating state revenue. And of course, because it's online, that's, while they were adhering to social distancing protocols and other things. And because of the revenue numbers being reported out of New Jersey, I think states that hadn't previously seriously considered online gaming as a source of revenue or even something they wanted to offer in their jurisdictions were suddenly very keen to consider it. And what I have noticed over the last year, and COVID has kind of juxtaposed itself right in the middle of that, is that there was a trend in states that were going to offer legal regulated sports betting to also offer or pass companion legislation for online gambling, online casinos as well. Nevada, we don't have online casinos. There's a real hesitation on the part of some gaming licensees with regard to interactive gaming. And so we don't currently have any participation in that, even though we've legalized it here.
Okay. That's definitely interesting to see the different structures, even though, I think we saw the same thing with the cannabis is, just because it's legalized doesn't mean that everything's in place to make sure that it actually happens. It's not okay, we voted in, switch and go. There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes to put that structure in place. And I'm glad you made that point, because I think that's something that the average person doesn't realize, that you have to have regulations, you have to have measures, a way of enforcing it, and so on. So I think that's a great insight there.
Yeah, well, you also have to hire staff too, right? So, for example, at the Nevada Gaming Control Board, throughout the entire state, there are 6 locations, 6 offices, and about 400 employees. So when you have a jurisdiction that's offering something new like sports betting, you've got to hire staff, you've got to get them trained in important critical issues, you've got to make sure that they're enforcing the regulations properly, that, well, first of all, they've got to even know what the regulations are. And so there is definitely a time consideration that has to go into place when a jurisdiction wants to offer a new form of gaming, particularly if it's going to be significant, like online casino, for example.
Okay, great. Let's talk some good news, because I know COVID-19 kind of been some depressing stuff. You mentioned earlier that we are seeing people come. There's the confidence there. I would agree. I fly to Salt Lake every other week, and every time when I come back, my plane is full, as much as it can be, because they still remove the middle seats. But it's full to capacity in that regard, and the line at the Uber station is just incredibly long. So to me, that's a good sign that things are going. It may also be that they have all the flights come in at the same time to save on staff. So that's why it appears that way. But we were talking before the show about a new casino opening up, new construction. So why don't you talk about that good news?
So Circuit Casino has its grand opening tonight in downtown Las Vegas, and that's the bright spot in all of this pandemic, the dismal news that we get out about the pandemic almost every day. It's the first time in 40 years that a new casino has been built in downtown Las Vegas. And I just want to clarify that downtown Las Vegas is not the Strip. There's a difference. We're talking about the Fremont Street Experience area downtown the city of Las Vegas. And so built from the ground up, brand new. It's a luxury offering. They're claiming to be the largest sports book in Nevada. So it's going to be very exciting to go and check out the new sports book and see how they've put that together and how it's been developed. There's a lot of excitement in town. In fact, even Derek Stevens is the owner or co-owner with his brother of the Circa, and it's their 3rd casino here. And even their competitors are excited because it's going to generate interest and it's good for everybody in downtown. So there is a lot of really positive buzz about Circuit Casino, and it's going to be fun to get down there tonight and check it out.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic news for downtown. I think it's fantastic news for Vegas in general. And I think overall, because of all the things we had going prior to COVID-19, we had a significant hiccup, but there's so many positive things going on in Nevada. We have tons of people moving here. We have new casinos going up. We have new industries moving in. So just want to paint the picture that we're not all gloom and doom. There actually is some exciting things happening.
Right. Well, and on the heels of that, if it's all right with you, I'd like to maybe talk a little bit about what's happened to our workforce here in Nevada for a moment, if we have some time.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great thing to talk about. Go ahead.
So, we talked earlier a little bit about some of the changes that we think are going to be made more permanent in the gaming industry. These comments are not particular to the gaming industry, but more across all industry in Nevada and throughout the United States. But I think the way in which we work is forever changed. I think we've learned by baptism by fire, that many jobs can be done off site, whether that's from home or a secondary employer location or combination of both, whatever that looks like. I think what McKinsey and Company just found in their annual Women and the Workplace study is pretty interesting. I think it's going to have ramifications for at least the next decade. Essentially, their research focused on COVID-19. They found that women, particularly women of color, are more likely to have been laid off or furloughed because of COVID-19. Working mothers have always worked what is coined a double shift. In other words, they work their day job and then they come home and have a second full-time job of caring for children and doing household labor and those sorts of things. There were certain support structures and mechanisms in place that helped give them the ability to accomplish all of this, things such as school and childcare. That's all been upended. And then what I think is the most fascinating news is that 1 in 4 women are contemplating either downshifting their careers or leaving the workforce altogether. I think that takeaway from all of this is that families are going to suffer. And I hope that employers will take a minute to step back and look and see what they can do to help provide some support networks and mechanisms for their female employees. We know that as of 2017 in the United States, 41% of mothers were the sole or primary breadwinners for their families, and they earned at least half of their total household income. And included in that statistic are single working mothers, married mothers who out earn their husbands, demographics like that. In most families with children at home, the majority of mothers work outside the home for pay. Among married couples, 2/3 of mothers are employed. That's 67.3%. That's a lot of women that were previously engaged in the workforce that we're now at risk of losing. And I think the takeaways from that are that all of the gains that we have made in gender equity and diversity over the last couple of decades are going to be reversed. I think innovation will be stifled. There are lots of research studies that show that women help companies be more productive. They help them thrive. They increase creativity and innovation, and having female employees is really a positive and productive thing. So I think one of the changes that we're going to find across all industry is that more is going to be required from employers. So, for example, throughout the US, we are already seeing some employers benefits for their employees. We're seeing other employers provide educational tools or opportunities for the children of their employees. Some others are offering stipends to help assist with the costs of maintaining a home office. We're seeing flexibility in work schedules. Other companies, because of the blurred lines between when start and stop for the workday occur, companies are offering an entire day off once a month for the whole company so that everything shuts down, so that you don't feel like your work is just piling up while you're not working, to help people have a mental health day, get caught up on life stuff, and generally just get some breathing room, because it's been a pretty intense experience these last several months as we're watching the world attempt to navigate through this global pandemic. And so I hope for those of your listeners that are employers that there will be some thought put into how to retain your women and what you can do in cost-effective ways to help ensure that they have an opportunity to remain in the workforce.
Yeah, I think that's a great note. And I was talking to a business owner yesterday, and we were talking about employee satisfaction, and there's been nowhere to go, so nobody's been taking vacations, and so they're getting burnt out because I've got nothing else to do. I'm going to work, and this employer was saying, telling his people, hey, take time off. Even if you can't go anywhere, just stay home and don't work. You're not allowed to work. We're going to shut you out because you need that time to just relax and breathe, and it will have dividends for everybody, for home, for work, all of that. So I think that's a great point. And yeah, we do need to make sure that all that progress that has been made does not get stifled because of something like this.
Yeah, well, and just even in my own household, my husband was in healthcare and he was considered a non-essential provider except for emergencies, and so his business was shut down for 7 weeks. And while that was stressful for a whole host of reasons, he got to get a lot of rest and do a lot of self-care. I thought because of the shutdown, particularly the gaming shutdown, that my life was going to be crickets. And instead, my life just kind of sped up, and I've never been more busy. And so I do feel a little bit of that being tired and constantly having to work and feeling those lines are blurred between home and work because of extended hours. And part of that's just because of the nature of what I do. I mean, I help out in a variety of jurisdictions, so I could be on a phone call at 5:30 in the morning or 8:30 at night, depending on the jurisdiction that I'm talking to, and that's just part of the worldwide gaming industry. But it's interesting to see how in different families across various segments of our economy, people have been impacted. And it's tough out there because our local workforce has endured furloughs and layoffs and reduced working hours. Our education system has been shut down or moved to an online environment. So for working parents who have children, that is really tough, especially if they're working from home and have no childcare options. They're now having to navigate work. They're going to have to, and how they provide care for family, and not just people with young children. I mean, now for the first time, you've got a lot of millennials moving back home with their parents because the economy is so rough out there. You've got people who are caring for aging parents. And so there are a lot of people who are now providing primary care for family members who are struggling and trying to do it all from home with all these added stressors, and it's particularly tough in Nevada, I think, because in early July, the legislature was called into a special session to deal with anticipated shortfalls in state revenue, and significant budget cuts were made. I think in the upcoming legislative session in 2021, we're going to see more of the same because we just have not captured the gross gaming revenue taxes that we are accustomed to. And with less money going into our general fund, that just translates into decreased services to provide struggling families with during this very, very difficult time. So, there's a lot to think about in terms of where we fit in that ecosystem and what each of us as individuals or business owners or whatever influence we have, what we can do to help make things better for people around us and help take the long-term view that, right now people need a little bit of extra care, a little bit of extra investment, and a little bit of extra interest to make sure that they're being taken care of.
I couldn't agree more. So I think that's a great place to end. If our listeners have any questions, how would you prefer that they reach out to you?
Email is always best, and my email is fairly simple. It's Becky, traditional spelling, at BeckyHarrisNV.com. I'm real good to respond to email.
Yeah, and I can attest to that. Well, Becky, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. A lot of great information on there. Hopefully our listeners learned a lot. And to our listeners, as always, please like and subscribe. Let us know how we're doing. And then if you have ideas on who we should have on the show next, please let us know so we keep the content relevant. And with that, we'll sign it off for now.